Hi, beautiful people. It's Saria here for you, showing up to share with you types of abuse and their impact. The first thing I want you to know is you are not bad. I've worked with thousands of people, and the biggest thing that people who've had abuse feel is that it's their fault and they are bad inside, that they deserved that treatment. Whatever type of abuse it is, the majority of the people that I work with feel like they are bad inside. And I want you to know this is not the truth. You are not bad. And believing you are bad is the impact of abuse. That's the impact of abuse. I'm just posting the link into the event so that people can find it easily. There we go. All right. So that's the first thing, is I want you to know that you are not bad. And if you are on this call, and when I ask you, do you think you're bad? And you raise your hand, that is not the truth. It is the truth that you think you're bad. But the truth is you are not bad. You have been programmed to believe that because you've had abuse along the way. At some point, that has made you believe or think about yourself that you are bad. That's one of the biggest impacts of abuse. And I don't want you to get into a state as we're going through this of this is horrendous and it's awful and you're always going to suffer from it. The reality is that the brain is neuroplastic. Our bodies recreate themselves every 7 years, and we have the capacity to change. It takes a few core skills to be able to do that, but we have the capacity to change. So I don't want you to think this is how it's going to be and it will always be this way, because you can change. And for those of you there are a few of you who have signed up for the Overcome Emotional Abuse program, and I will put the link for that later. I just want to quickly share the group, but we're going to whiz through because obviously there is a lot of abuse. And I can't pick out in detail every single little thing, because otherwise we'd literally be here all night if we went through the nuances of it. But over time, I'm doing little series on the different types of abuse. So let me find the notes. And as I go through this, you're welcome to share in the comments, but I'm going to check my notes so that I don't miss anything. We're going to go through that you can reduce the impact of what happened. We're going to go through the types of abuse, and then we're going to go through this Harvard study that looked at loads of people, white men specifically, because it was a study done of university students over 50 years ago, and they followed them through their whole lives from 24 to 74. So it was a 50-year-long study. And in those days, a lot of Black people and women weren't in university. So that is the basis of the study. But let's first look, because I want to give you hope watching this. If you have had adversity and abuse in childhood, you can shift that. And I'll just quickly share 5 ways you can do that. 1, you can talk about it with people who understand and validate. That's one of the biggest things that I see in the Overcome Emotional Abuse program, is people going, oh my God, you've shared that and I didn't even realize I do that. I didn't realize that was because of abuse. I just thought it was like a quirk inside of me. Or, oh my God, that brings so much healing to me. It makes such a difference to share it in a place that's validating, rather than to people who go, you should just be grateful for your parents. You should respect your parents. You've only got one mother. So you need to be around people who, the other day, an old family friend who I knew when I was 3 said, "Oh, I just accept my family warts and all." And I was like, "Okay, well, how about I smash your head against the wall and then you can see. Would you accept me warts and all?" She blocked me. I don't know why. So that's number one. The next is we have to face it. In the prolonged exposure therapy that I did, they said the biggest issue that causes flashbacks, mental health issues, is that people avoid what happened. They avoid the feelings, the memories, the experiences in life, and people who might remind them of what happened. And then it manifests in their bodies in a breakdown or taking it out on others. So you need to face what was there. Then you need to work through it with the body, creatively, with the emotions, to process what's there in a multi-sensory healing, not just talk therapy, because remember what we said, that talk therapy accesses the cortex, and we want to do work that activates the healing in the amygdala, the limbic system, the whole of the brainstem where core memories of trauma are kept. We also need to foster our identity, especially for folk who've been neglected or begun to believe thoughts of shame. So you develop who you choose to be rather than just staying in that place where you relive and outlive that. You relive that programming that's destructive and toxic for you. And then we need to grow the skills to be able to thrive. So those are the way out of it. And I want to share that at the start so that you can know there is a possibility of change. Yes, oh my God, I do. I was just thinking when I first went live, I feel so much better. My voice isn't cracking. Hear a tiny bit. I'm still coughing a bit and blowing my nose a bit, but geez, night and day. 3 weeks of being sick has been hell. All right. Okay, so you ready for, now we're going to look at what is abuse. And I'm talking fast because I don't want to make a long video and then you guys don't watch it or it becomes overwhelming because it's too much. Okay. So I just want to quickly also share, let me just see, what if somebody has been talking about their past but only to validate their anger and not heal? Anger is the first stage often of healing, and anger is really important because anger gives you the energy to be able to heal. So it's one of the first steps, and I think it's a really misunderstood emotion. Anger is really essential and supportive to your healing, but what it takes is using that anger to become who you need to be and to face it. So yeah, forgiveness isn't needed for healing. And he has a right, a right to be angry, but he also needs to honor your heart, your space, and make sure that you're accessible. I spoke about that in a video. You can look it up on flooding other people, and you're welcome to share that with him. That flooding without accessibility is important. The challenge is that with a lot of people, they don't know how to heal. They don't know the procedure of what to do to heal. So instead of just being angry at them, he would have to process what happened and love that little boy in him with kindness and care. But that anger is actually frequently a positive thing, as long as he's not taking it out on you and on other people who he loves. Then he's repeating it rather than taking it out. But anger in itself generally can be a very positive emotion in that it gives you the energy to have a breakthrough. If folk are just depressed or anxious, they often don't have the momentum to create change, and anger gives you momentum. All right, so let's look at the types of abuse. All right, so there are things like racism, homophobia, transphobia, ableism, that are all abusive. But all of those are manifest in different ways that we're going to look at now. And so if you have had racism where you've been assaulted physically, sexually, had microaggressions, emotional abuse, all of those, you've had a range of abuse because of it. Racism in itself is abuse. But we're going to go into the specifics of the different types of abuse. And you can notice what you've had. I don't want you to leap into it. What I'm sharing this for you is a validation of the impact so that you know that you are not bad. And you know you never deserved it and it's not your fault. And that you know that there is the potential and capacity to heal. But it takes investment of time, energy, money, and commitment so that you can become who you were always meant to be. All right, so let's go through it. I'm going to just tonight, just for the sake of time, look at 4 types of abuse. And then I'm going to give examples of 3 behaviors from each of those and 3 core impacts. That way we can get through each one. So let's look at physical abuse. And there's some things that across the board happen in all of them. And I will share about that at the end. Physical abuse. So physical abuse can be seeing domestic violence. And trying to protect a parent in domestic violence. It can be threats to yourself, like, if you don't stop crying, I'll give you something to cry about, which is a threat of violence. It can be assault. So those are all classified as physical abuse. The impact of that is that frequently they're toxic behaviors, where you take your emotions out on other people because other people have taken their emotions out on you, not showing you how to process them. So you repeat that by taking out your emotions on other people. If you've been physically abused, it can impact your brain development. So you have a lot of brain fog, brain injury issues like executive function issues. And you feel unsafe in the world, like the actual ground that you're walking on is not safe. So there's always a threat or a worry that other people are going to hurt you in the war because the fabric that you came from wasn't safe. Next, we've got sexual abuse. Sexual abuse is not just rape, it's also harassment, where you're made to feel unsafe and objectified simply because you have a body. And then it's also molesting. Now, across the board of sexual abuse, whether it's molested, harassed, raped, sexually assaulted, every client that I've worked with has said, it's not bad in comparison to other people. Everyone at some point has believed it wasn't as bad. In sexual abuse, there's a lot of shame about it and self-blame, that in some way it was your fault that you were at that party, that you had that alcohol, that you wore that dress, because the culture has often, especially with women, turned it against that it's a woman's fault rather than whoever is doing the assaulting, it's their responsibility. It creates a lack of trust where you don't know who to trust in the world, especially if you've been primed for sexual abuse in childhood or molesting in childhood, where you become very anxious around anybody who's nice to you. Because if they're nice to you, then they're going to lure you into something. So you become very defensive and withdraw from people or get really wary of any niceness. It also impacts your intimacy, where you get flashbacks, and it affects your capacity to pleasure yourself because it's tainted with pain. And obviously, people don't want to experience pain when it's meant to be something pleasurable. And then it also affects your voice, where you silence yourself because you don't want to speak out, because frequently, if you've tried to speak out, a parent or a relative or police might have invalidated you. So it takes away your voice and impacts your capacity to speak out in other areas. Okay, So I said a few more than 3, hey, in sexual abuse. Then there is psychological abuse. And, I can just share for myself in sexual abuse. I was wondering in my relationships why I really, really struggled with relationships. And so when I went to therapy, I was expecting that what was going to come up was the abandonment by my father. But what came up time and time again was the sexual molesting that I had experienced from my grandfather. And I was stunned by just how deeply it had impacted me, where I didn't trust nice people, where I stayed away, where people were difficult. I would feel, at least I know what's coming. And so that would keep me in toxic relationships because that was what I knew. All right. So then there's psychological abuse. These are things like gaslighting. Gaslighting is where somebody will make you doubt yourself, make you think that you're crazy for what you're saying. So if you confront somebody, they'll turn around and go, no, that was you. I didn't do that. And then you begin to doubt yourself and wonder. It just like leaves your head in disarray. There's double binds where somebody goes, oh, it's so nice to see you. But you can hear their seething or their daggers or their cruelty or their backstabbing in their words. And so there's like, you can feel like you can see them smiling, but you can hear the toxicity underneath. And so it's kind of like the split in your head where you can't quite make sense of reality. And then there's scapegoating, where somebody is deliberately targeted because they speak out or because they're emotional, because they're different. It could be because they're darker skinned than the rest of the family. It could be that they communicate secrets that they notice. And so instead of the family processing what's in the issues, they take it out on the family, or at least on the scapegoat. So what happens in this is people lose the sense of self and they lose their mind. So they can't ground in themselves because their sense of self is being jarred. And so they have this sense of losing their mind as well as the sense of losing themselves. So they don't quite know what the reality is. How that impacts them is that because of this split in themselves, they struggle to get grounded in like what they need to do. So there's a lack of productivity, like they can't get stuff done, they can't work because their mind is just in such disarray. And then they become more reactive because of what's going on, because they just are so frustrated and hurting. And they get labeled the abuser and somebody toxic because they're just flooded and struggling with all these different feelings. Great. All right. And that's, I experienced that in the last year where I got scapegoated. And I found an article that labeled the research into double binds of how it impacted people, impacted their mental health and so many issues. It was so validating to hear that it wasn't me. This was the impact of double binds where people are like, yes, that's so nice. And then sending emails or backstabbing, just a complete mind fuck. And that's literally how it feels, is this mind fuck. And then finally, number 4, there's emotional abuse. And emotional abuse and neglect, I'm going to combine together. It's mocking. So mocking somebody for who they are, so they feel bad about themselves. Dismissing what they feel. So if they say, I'm feeling hurt or angry by what you say, oh, you don't worry about that. Just let that go. Or ignoring somebody so they feel invisible. They feel like they don't matter in the world, they're unlovable, and they're unworthy. And they don't have a sense of self because they don't have this, because they haven't been nurtured and nourished and tuned in They don't have a sense of self. They struggle to make decisions, especially if they've been criticized and made wrong. So they're scared to step out into the world. And they struggle to trust themselves in the world because they've been made wrong so much. All right. So I'm going to just share about this Harvard study, because I think this Harvard study was fascinating, even though it was just cis white males that were studied, because it's a longitudinal study of over 50 years. It was a Harvard test, so all the students that were tested were Harvard students, and then they followed them through their lives, testing them every now and then throughout their lives on various criteria. It started off with, what was your childhood like? How respected, loved, and cared for did you feel? And those kids who had abuse, physical abuse, emotional abuse, psychological abuse, who didn't feel respected, who didn't feel loved, who didn't feel cared for. When I first read the study, I just burst into tears, reading what a struggle it was. And the one point that really made a difference, or it just touched my heart, was the lead theorist who created the study. When he died, his daughter took over the study. And she was then meeting up with these now 70-year-old men to research and see how were their brain waves and their heart waves, to see what difference had happened in their lives. And as she did the study, what was fascinating, because she sat in the same room and had conversations, but she was wired to a heart and EEG monitor too. And so when they were sitting together, the experimenter and the person they were studying, these Harvard grads, they would monitor the heart rates of both the experimenter and the person, the Harvard grad. And what they found was, with the folk who had been loved, within seconds, their heart rates harmonized with the experimenter. But those who had felt unloved and not respected and not cared for, the heart waves didn't match. They didn't know how to co-regulate and connect in that way, in a bodily reaction, because they were so held together and protected themselves so much from connection, because connection wasn't safe. These are 75-year-old men. Just couldn't relax into that. And that for me was just so challenging, that they had lived 50 years without getting that love and care and goodness. And I don't want that for any one of you. I don't want you to be at 70 years old and not have rewired yourself and learned the skills to love so that you can thrive. If you have had physical, emotional, sexual, mental abuse, come and join the Overcome Emotional Abuse program, because then you'll gain those skills that we talked about in order to heal yourself. That's the link there. And I want to go back to what overall, for all of these people, what the impact of abuse was. So they found with the folk who didn't feel loved, cared for, respected, and didn't feel safe, they had more illness like blood pressure, cancer, and comorbid issues than folk who felt loved in childhood. They had more mental illness, PTSD, anxiety, depression, OCD, than folk who had come from loving backgrounds. They had more struggles with relationships. So in those days, divorce was not welcome. Some of them didn't ever get married, and if they did get married, they got divorced, while as those who had loved had longer term, more fulfilling relationships where they felt happy and loved. And they had deeper friendships that had lasted for life, whereas the folk who had grown, who'd had abuse, felt less loved and had fewer friendships in the world. Financially, this stunned me. You think these are folk from the 60s who, throughout their career over the last 50 years, those who had, so these are Harvard grads, so they sort of niched people. Those who had abuse or felt unloved earned 100,000 less than those who had been loved. They had more alcohol and drug addiction. They had more job changes and instability through their lives, career instability. And they felt like they were a failure and felt bad about who they are. And for me, that was devastating. And when I read that, I was doing my master's 10 years ago. And I don't want that for any one of you. So I'm just going to go back. I'm going to put the link to the program there, but I'm going to go back and share. I don't want any of you to be going through that. And in order to shift that, these are the 5 core things of healing from that. 1, talk about it with people who understand and validate your experience instead of making you wrong so that you still think that you're bad. You're not bad. What happened to you was bad and wrong. 2, face it. And if you don't have people, I just want to share, if you don't have people, come and join the Overcome Emotional Abuse program where you will get that empathy and validation. 2, face it. If you avoid it and you don't look at it, what you avoid will manifest in your bodies. You think that all these Harvard grads were in a culture then, especially, that was, you don't express what you're feeling, you don't communicate it, you silence yourself. And then it impacted them where they had more disease, masses more, depending on how much abuse you had, up to 30 times more. So we don't want to leave it in our bodies and have breakdowns or take it out on other people. We want to face it ourselves and work through it. To work through it, it's not just in talk therapy. We also need to engage the body, creativity, emotions, to be able to process the stuff in the hindbrain, amygdala, limbic system that isn't accessed by talk therapy. Then we need to foster our identity so we gain a sense of self, that we're proud of who we are, we love who we are, we enjoy spending time with ourselves, we feel alive, and we wake up happy to be ourselves. And then we need to grow the skills that we didn't receive in childhood, how to respect ourselves, how to love ourselves, how to empathize, process feelings, create our dreams, take baby steps. All of those things, we need to grow the skills that to thrive that we didn't receive in childhood. And those are the things that we teach in the Overcome Emotional Abuse program. So I've done that whole thing in 28 minutes. Are there any questions that you have for me on overcoming any of this or on the impact of abuse? Because I need you to know, I'm just going to put up the, I need you to know essentially that you are not bad. What happened to you was bad. You never deserved it. And you do have the capacity to heal. It is not easy. It is hard to heal those things, but you are worth it. And it takes, I said earlier that anger is a healthy tool to utilize of that was wrong and I don't deserve that. There's a difference between healthy anger and unhealthy anger. Healthy anger is that was wrong, I didn't deserve that, and I'm going to create an amazing life for myself, versus what happened to me was awful, so everybody in the world is going to suffer. Those are two very different angry ways to be. One is powerful and positive and utilizing the knowledge that that was an injustice and you didn't deserve it, and you want to create the world to be a better place. That's healthy anger. And it's really positive because it gives you the momentum to change. So those are the types of abuse. Does anybody have any questions? I know that I've whizzed through it, but I wanted to make sure that every one of you knew what abuse is so that you can validate yourself, love yourself, and cherish yourself and grow the skills to healing. And if you are not in the Overcome Emotional Abuse program, tonight is the last night to sign up. Doors close at midnight Pacific. And we would love to have you with us. What you will get is a community of people who validate you, who care for you. You will get the meditations, the skills, the care to be able to heal from it, to face it, to calm yourself, to regulate, and to grow a sense of self and respect. So you love yourself and you become the chooser in your world, choosing what is healthy for you, what makes you happy, what fulfills you, and being around in work situations where you are valued and cherished so you can thrive in life. Because what happened in the past was wrong and it wasn't okay and you didn't deserve it. And now you have the chance and the capacity to be able to grow the skills to overcome what happened and to heal yourself so that, like, imagine if you had not had that negation, that violence, that lack of processing or emotional validation in childhood. And you now had love, care, security, and goodness. In that foundation, you can seed and fertilize your goodness and become all you were meant to be, all that you want to be. But it does take drawing a line and committing to yourself and saying, right, I'm going to do this. I'm not willing to spend the rest of my life suffering because of what I had in childhood. I'm going to create who I am. I'm going to heal what happened. I'm going to find my voice. And I'm going to speak up so that my body is not left to process, but I'm communicating what I feel and what I need, because that's what you've always deserved. So how can I manage my anger towards the person who's made me suffer and feel unworthy? I have forgiven, but I struggle with negativity and fear. You know, anger is a fascinating emotion, and I love anger. I think it's just such a gift because it gives you momentum. But if you are angry, there's a part of you that is, you need to look at it because there are different things that are going on. Anger is telling you that you were violated in some way. Your boundaries were violated. You were treated badly. If you have not found your voice, then your anger will keep coming up because it wants you to stand up for yourself. So everybody is different in terms of what anger is there for. And it could also be a protector that is saying, I'm going to stay angry because if I forgive them too quickly, I allow them to come close to me and they do it again. And so I'm going to stay angry with them because if I allow that anger to quieten down, then they violate me again. So I would engage with the anger. If you did the Tame the Triggers workshop, I teach in that how to work with the parts of yourself. And if you've signed up for the Overcome Emotional Abuse program, there are videos on anger, on how to process anger and work with it. But everybody is an individual. And so there isn't a cookie cutter approach to working with anger. But your anger has wisdom and connection. There is also in the Tame the Triggers workshop, if you did that, there is a video on in the Q&A. If you search in the Searchy Hub and type anger, you will find a video where in the Q&A where I discuss working with anger. So forgiveness often, if you forgive too quickly an abuser, they often repeat it. So as somebody who's worked with thousands of people who've had abuse, I don't recommend forgiveness as like just a procedure that you do. I recommend that you do the healing first. You process what happened, you meet yourself with love, and then forgiveness happens naturally as you grow in compassion and understanding for what happened. But when you forgive at the start, before you've worked through your anger, then often they will repeat the abuse. So while forgiveness as a concept is great and people can utilize that, I have found as a therapist that forgiving too soon often increases the abuse and continues it and perpetuates it. So I don't advocate for forgiveness. I just think it naturally happens. You know, I see it so often with clients that as they have done their own healing work, they've worked through their own anger and pain, then compassion arises for what other people have gone through and why they've behaved like that. And then forgiveness just happens normally and naturally. So I'm sending everybody love. I don't like to do long videos because then it's hard for people to find the time to watch them. We would love to have you with us in the Overcome Emotional Abuse program. Doors close tonight at midnight Pacific time. Come and join us. I'm really looking forward to beginning on Monday because I just see so much of the difference that it's made. I'll put in the comments. Let me see. The one thing I saw you post somewhere today is that I'm just finding this link. In this series, there is a whole thing of the videos of different people who have experienced the program, and you can watch that, and you can read or watch other people's experience of the program, and then see if it's for you. If you've got any questions about it, get in touch with me, ask me about it. I would love to help you to make a decision. I don't want anyone to have any pressure to do it. If it calls you and you know, right, I'm done. I had that abuse. I've always thought I was bad and there was something wrong with me. I'm going to heal that impact so that I can grow and thrive in the world. Then come and join us. We'd love to have you. All right, everybody. Love to you.